The MMA world is in chaos. Jon Jones has officially retired, but no one believes it's the end. Dana White is cornered. Tom Aspinall is furious. And in the middle of it all, Khabib Nurmagomedov just made Dana an offer that stunned everyone. An Olympic gold medalist wants into the UFC, and Khabib's willing to personally make it happen. But that's just the start. Pereira has issued a new challenge. Fans in Baku turned on the UFC mid-event, and behind closed doors, the next massive heavyweight fight is already in the works. So buckle up. We're breaking down all of it. And what Dana decides next will shape the UFC's future for years. For months, fans mocked Tom Aspinall when he boldly claimed, "I'll retire Jon Jones without even fighting him." But somehow, that's exactly what just happened. The MMA world blinked, and in that moment, the greatest fighter of all time quietly walked away. No press conference, no build-up, just a sudden statement confirming Jon Jones was done. And while the headlines celebrated a legacy, Tom Aspinall stood in the shadow, newly crowned as the undisputed UFC heavyweight champion. But with no coronation, no war, and no closure, Dana White had guaranteed this fight just a few months earlier. 100%, he said. That fight is happening. But when the cameras rolled in Baku, Dana didn't even try to hide the shock in his voice. Jon Jones had retired, and that was that. The silence around the decision was deafening. Fans wanted answers, and so did fighters. Why now? Why like this? Jon Jones had never been the type to turn away from a challenge, at least not publicly. But here was Tom Aspinall in his prime, ready to fight, begging for the matchup that fans had waited over a year to see. And Jones disappeared. Tom didn't gloat. He didn't celebrate. In his message to fans, he simply acknowledged the moment, thanked those who stood by him during nearly a year of forced inactivity, and promised to defend the belt often, something Jones hadn't done since entering the heavyweight division. But make no mistake, Aspinall knew what this moment meant. He had just been handed the throne without ever getting to earn it in the eyes of the world. And yet, as Jon Jones's statement rippled through social media, a different storm was brewing. Because this wasn't just a retirement, it was a vacuum. A champion had left, and now the UFC had to decide what to do next. One half of the dream fight was still standing, willing and healthy. The other, silent. But behind that silence, something didn't sit right. Jon's retirement timing raised eyebrows, not just because of the Aspinall call-out, but because of something far more serious. An incident that happened earlier in the year. Reports were beginning to circulate, whispers of legal trouble, allegations of an accident in February that had never made the front page. That's when fans started asking a more uncomfortable question. Did Jon really retire because he wanted to, or because he had to? When the official retirement statement dropped, it didn't feel like Jon Jones. It read more like a brand signing off than a fighter laying down his gloves. "Today, I'm officially announcing my retirement from the UFC," he wrote. "This decision comes after a lot of reflection. I'm excited to contribute in new ways." The tone was polished, neutral, and completely devoid of emotion. This wasn't the Jon Jones who once called out the entire heavyweight division. This wasn't the brash, unpredictable champion who lit up press conferences with one-liners and psychological warfare. This was a man walking away, but not explaining why. In the hours after the post, speculation went wild. Fans dug into past interviews, clips resurfaced, and then came the alleged February car accident. News began circulating that Jon had been involved in a hit-and-run style incident, one that never made it to the main MMA media cycle. Reports were vague, and no charges had been filed publicly. But the timing matched. Jon retired just as the legal questions began to bubble. And when pressed about it online, he responded with a single sentence. Remember, even the media can get it wrong if they don't have all the facts. It wasn't a denial. It wasn't a clarification. It was a message of deflection. One that raised more questions than it answered. And for longtime observers of Jon Jones's career, it felt eerily familiar. This wasn't the first time off-cage issues collided with a title reign. From DUIs to banned substances to violent altercations, Jon's legacy has always lived on a knife's edge. Each time, he returned to the cage. Each time, he reminded the world that he was still the most dominant fighter on the planet. But this time, there would be no comeback. Or would there? Because not everyone everyone believed the story was over. And one of them was Daniel Cormier, the man who knew John better than anyone inside the cage. When Cormier spoke, it wasn't with bitterness. It was with something far more telling: curiosity. "I don't think he's done," Cormier said. "I think if Tom loses his next fight, John might be back." And that idea, just the possibility, changed everything. Daniel Cormier didn't celebrate John Jones's exit. He respected it, but buried within that respect was something else: unease. Cormier had been there for John's highest and lowest moments. He fought him in wars that tested both men's souls. And even now, years later, he was the first to admit, "That was the best I've ever been, and he beat me." But in the same breath, Cormier made a subtle admission. He believed John's retirement wasn't final. He believed something had changed, something fans didn't know yet. When a guy like John says he's retiring, Cormier warned, it's usually never the full story. He wasn't wrong. John Jones had always left a back door open. His words were never absolute. His timeline never concrete. And when you zoomed out, it became clear. He didn't retire after the Stipe fight because he hadn't fought it yet. He didn't retire after the Gain fight because he needed that one statement win at heavyweight. But retiring now, without defending the belt, without facing the man the world believed could beat him, that didn't feel like legacy. That felt like strategy. Cormier then dropped a thought that hung in the air. If Tom Aspinall loses, John comes back. That one sentence changed the narrative, because suddenly, this wasn't about walking away, it was about control. John Jones, the ultimate tactician, may have simply hit pause, letting time do the work, letting the heavyweight division cannibalize itself, letting Tom fight dangerous matchup, letting age even the odds. And Dana White, he knew exactly what was happening, but his hands were tied. The UFC had promoted John as the baddest man on the planet, and now that man had ghosted the most important fight of the year. Publicly, Dana defended John. "He's never ducked anyone," he said. But privately, there were already backup plans, because if John wouldn't fight Tom, someone else would. And that someone was already bulking up to 244 pounds. While fans mourned the collapse of the Jones versus Aspinall dream fight, something unexpected was brewing behind the scenes. Alex Pereira, the man who had already conquered middleweight and light heavyweight, was suddenly being whispered about in heavyweight conversations. At first, it sounded like social media hype, but then photos surfaced. Pereira had bulked up, and not by a little. At a weigh-in in Brazil, he tipped the scale at 243.8 pounds, nearly 15 pounds heavier than his usual off-season weight. The message was clear. He wasn't just lifting weights, he was preparing for war. The idea of Pereira entering the heavyweight division shook the MMA world. This was the same fighter who knocked out Israel Adesanya, who head-kicked Jiri Prochazka into another dimension, and who walked into the Octagon like a mythical warrior. But now, he was targeting the biggest sharks in the tank. When asked about it in an interview, Pereira didn't confirm or deny. "Right now, I'm focused on light heavyweight," he said. But if the timing and offer are right, he let the sentence hang in the air, a perfectly planted seed for speculation. The UFC, always hungry for spectacle, took notice. With John Jones gone and the heavyweight throne looking shaky, a new storyline was too tempting to ignore. Alex Pereira versus Tom Aspinall, a striker's chess match between two of the most technically gifted finishers in MMA today. And with Pereira already bulking up, fans began connecting the dots. He wasn't just teasing, he was preparing. And then, something else happened. Dana White's matchmaking team started floating ideas. Reporters were told behind closed doors that UFC 306 or UFC 307 could host a blockbuster heavyweight clash. Suddenly, the fight nobody expected was becoming the fight everyone wanted. Aspinall's message to the UFC, "Make me the most active heavyweight champion ever," was being heard loud and clear. And Pereira, he didn't seem intimidated. But one question still lingered. Why would Pereira move up now, especially with a possible rematch against Ankalaev for the light heavyweight belt still on the table? The answer might be more calculated than anyone expected. Behind the scenes, there was more at play than just weight class ambition. According to sources close to Pereira's camp, the decision to bulk up wasn't a random experiment. It was a strategic pivot. Magomed Ankalaev, the current light heavyweight contender, had publicly stated he wanted a rematch. But Pereira, who thrives on legacy-defining moments, saw no upside in going backwards. His team began looking at divisions above and saw a perfect opportunity. Tom Aspinall was fresh, newly crowned, but not yet battle-tested against the highest level of star power. And while Tom's skill was undeniable, his name didn't yet carry the global aura that someone like Jon Jones had. For a fighter like Pereira, who thrives in psychological warfare, this was ideal. A dangerous opponent, yes, but one who hadn't yet tasted the chaos that Pereira could bring. This was a winnable risk with a massive reward, a chance to be the first-ever triple division champion in UFC history. The historical implications alone were staggering. Conor McGregor had done double division, so had Amanda Nunes, but a middleweight to heavyweight leap. No one had pulled that off. If Pereira succeeded, he would shatter weight class narratives and put his name in MMA's untouchable tier. The UFC, meanwhile, was drooling over the possibility. They needed star power in the post-Jones vacuum, and a fight between Tom Aspinall and Alex Pereira, marketed as a clash of eras, clash of divisions, was already writing itself. But here's what most fans missed. Pereira had already been studying Tom. During the lead-up to UFC 300, the two were nearly booked to fight. It fell through due to timing and John's injury status, but both camps had prepped scouting reports. Pereira knew Tom's angles, knew his tendency to pull back when defending low kicks, knew his guard dropped on left-hand feints. He had been preparing in silence, waiting, watching. And now that Jon Jones had stepped out, the path was suddenly wide open. But just as things began to align, another twist dropped. This time from a place no one expected, Dagestan. While the MMA world obsessed over heavyweight matchups and Jon Jones conspiracy theories, a quiet meeting took place thousands of miles away. Dana White had been invited to Dagestan not for a fight, not for promotion, but for dinner. Seated at a long table alongside Khabib Nurmagomedov, Islam Makhachev, and a circle of champions and prodigies, Dana found himself surrounded by the next generation. And one name stood out: Abdul Rashid Sadulayev, two-time Olympic gold medalist, undefeated in freestyle wrestling for nearly a decade, a living legend in combat sports. And now, according to Khabib, ready for the UFC. During a translated call, Khabib made the offer directly. He wants to fight in UFC, he said, as Dana raised his eyebrows. It wasn't just talk. Sadulayev was training, cutting weight, and already sparring with some of Khabib's top talent. He had never fought MMA before, but his ground control and explosive athleticism were enough to raise alarms across the heavyweight division. The timing couldn't have been more perfect or more suspicious. Jon Jones retires. The division opens up. Pereira bulks up. And now a Dagestani destroyer is entering the arena? Fans who caught the video thought it was a joke at first, until Dana smiled and said, "Let's talk about it." That one line sent the community into chaos. Imagine a 240-pound wrestling machine with Sadulayev's pedigree entering the UFC and calling out Tom Aspinall in his debut. It sounds absurd, but absurdity has never stopped the UFC before. And if anyone could fast-track a debut and make it look inevitable, it's Khabib. His influence in Dagestan isn't just athletic, it's political, cultural, religious. When Khabib makes a call, doors open, and Dana, always the showman, knew exactly what was happening. If Sadulayev enters, the division changes, and so does the pressure on Tom Aspinall. He no longer just has to fend off Pereira's striking or wait for Jon Jones to unretire. He now has to prepare for a ground game that even Fabricio Werdum would struggle to survive. And in the middle of it all, Tom stayed quiet. But then he dropped a video that changed everything. After weeks of whispers, speculation, and power plays from all sides, Tom Aspinall finally broke his silence. No grand press conference, no clickbait headline, just a quiet, self-filmed video. He stood in a dark gym, shadowboxing under a flickering overhead light. The message? I'm ready. No excuses, no delays. If you want this belt, come get it. The video was only 41 seconds long, but it sent a shockwave across the fight world. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. There was no bravado, no trash talk, just calm precision. A man aware of the crosshairs on his back, unfazed by the names being thrown at him. And yet, that calm hinted at something deeper, something almost dangerous. Tom knew this wasn't just about defending a belt, it was about proving he could be a dominant, active champion in a division full of shadows. Jon Jones had vanished. Miocic was aging out. Gane had fizzled. Suddenly, the crown wasn't just on Tom's head, it was his to define. But defining it meant answering the call, no matter who picked up the phone. Dana White saw the fire in Tom's eyes, and fans began drawing comparisons to prime-era Georges St-Pierre, humble, calculated, and quietly lethal. The video wasn't just a message to his would-be challengers, it was a direct appeal to the UFC itself. Don't waste this moment. Don't slow this division down. Let's make history. And that's when something even more unexpected happened. Tom's longtime striking coach, a man rarely in the spotlight, appeared on a podcast and confirmed what many had suspected. Aspinall wasn't just training for a striker. He had already been working on anti-wrestling drills designed specifically for Olympic-level grapplers. "We've known about the Sadulayev possibility for months," he said. "You think we didn't notice Khabib flying to Vegas twice this year?" The plan had been set in motion long before the public knew. Tom was training for everyone. Pereira's sniping left hook, Sadulayev's chain wrestling, and yes, even the ghost of Jon Jones. But as his coach said, he's not training to react. He's training to reign. That one sentence, buried in a podcast, changed the tone of the heavyweight conversation. But the next surprise would come from someone far outside the Octagon. Someone fans never expected to weigh in on any of this. While the MMA world zeroed in on Tom, Pereira, and Sadulayev, Conor McGregor suddenly threw gasoline on the fire. Out of nowhere, he posted a cryptic tweet that read, "If Jon is out, I know who's next, and I've seen what he can do." No names, no location tags, just that. But it wasn't the tweet that shocked fans, it was the reply it got. Within minutes, a verified account belonging to a Dagestani government official responded, "There is no escape. The eagle left the cage open. The wolf is coming." The tweet was deleted within an hour, but screenshots were already viral. Reddit exploded. Forums lit up with theories. Was this real? Was Abdulrashid Sadulayev actually being positioned not just as a fighter, but as the next Khabib-level ambassador of Dagestan? People started piecing together timelines, jet photos, training sessions, and diplomatic visits. What they uncovered was a web that stretched far beyond MMA. Dana White had, according to multiple sources, met with Russian athletic representatives earlier in the year under the guise of discussing international partnerships. But what if that meeting had another purpose? What if Khabib was doing more than translating phone calls? Theories ranged from outrageous to chilling. Some said Sadulayev had been promised a fast-track title shot if he won 2 quick fights. Others believed Putin himself had taken interest in leveraging Dagestan's global image through MMA dominance. It was political soft power wrapped in takedowns and ground control. Meanwhile, McGregor, never one to let attention stray too far, hinted again in a podcast appearance that he might make a trip east soon. When pressed if it had anything to do with Dagestan, he smiled and changed the subject. But fans weren't buying it. Was he helping promote Sadulayev, or was he planning something even bigger? Regardless, the message was clear. The heavyweight division was no longer a triangle between Tom, Alex, and Jon. It had become a global stage where power brokers, politics, and cultural icons were shaping the next era. And just when it seemed like the chessboard was set, Dana White made a move that nobody expected. UFC 307 was just weeks away when Dana White held a closed-door meeting with matchmakers and broadcast executives. Cameras weren't allowed. Social media posts were embargoed, but leaks have a way of escaping. According to 3 separate insiders, Dana had greenlit a new heavyweight tournament format, one that would silently test the waters for what could become the most aggressive title cycle in modern UFC history. The format was simple: 2 high-profile bouts at heavyweight. Winner of each fight's Aspinall. If Tom wins both defenses, he's given a special designation, Unified Era Champion, and a pay-per-view points bump in his contract. But here's the kicker. The 2 names slated to headline those bouts were Alex Pereira and Abdulrashid Sadulayev. No interim belts, no gimmicks, just war. The UFC hadn't used this kind of pressure cooker strategy since the old tournament days. But Dana had one goal: to force a new golden age in the heavyweight division. He was tired of long layoffs, tired of ducking rumors, and above all, tired of social media beef replacing real battle. He wanted a three-headed monster. Aspinall, Pereira, Sadulayev, different styles, different legacy, but all explosive. And as the leaks spilled out into the MMA world, the response was thunderous. The possibility of Pereira's pinpoint striking against Sadulayev's suffocating ground game had fans arguing for days. Was this the new evolution of MMA? A triple threat arms race? Or just Dana's last gamble to save the division from turning stale? Tom Aspinall, when asked about it, simply said, "Line them up. I don't care where they're from. This belt's staying here." And that, in the end, was the perfect setup. Because for once, the UFC wasn't trying to sell a fight with insults, memes, or theatrics. It was selling legacy. It was selling the idea that heavyweight MMA, after years of stagnation, was about to enter a renaissance. 3 fighters, 1 throne, and no more Jon Jones to distract the spotlight.